Welcome to our Banned Books author panel. Let's introduce our amazing guests.
We have Barbara D., who has written 15 award-winning middle-grade novels and whose books are star-crossed, Maybe He Just Likes You, and The Almost Perfect Guide to Imperfect Boys have been banned for reasons like a same-gender crush and middle school sexual harassment.
Gayle Forman, the #1 New York Times bestselling author and co-founder of Authors Against Book Bans, is here. Her book, If I Stay, in Just One Day, had been banned for having PG-13 level content.
Jasminne Mendez is with us, and her middle-grade novel that came out last month, The Story of My Anger, takes on book bans and censorship head-on.
#1 New York Times bestselling author Marieke Njikamp is with us. Her young adult novel, This Is Where It Ends, has been banned for its realistic portrayal of a school shooting and for LGBTQ plus representation. Thank you all so much for being here. There's a saying that everyone's a hero of their own story. If that's true, then the people who push banned books probably see themselves as the hero and see us, those who defend the right to read, as the villain. Do you think that's accurate? And if so, how should we respond to that?
What an opening question, huh? That was impressive. I don't think I've been asked that intelligent of a question by too many adult interviewers, and I hope by my talking I've given someone a moment to think of an answer.
I just can't imagine how anyone could be heroic who tries to suppress other people's voices. You know, a true hero is somebody who takes a stand and welcomes other people along with them. And so, you know, if you are banning books, if you're plucking books off the shelves and depriving people of the chance to read them just because of your own political or religious beliefs, you are not a hero.
And I would say history has shown us that those who are the ones banning books do not end up doing well in history books later on. And so, yeah, I agree. I don't see how silencing anyone's stories is heroic. I think that is another story that they're trying to tell about those of us who are being banned and whose stories are being banned, pointing the finger and saying we're the villain to further vilify our stories, our existence, rather than celebrating it, because it is fear. They fear the loss of power and control that they have held on to for so long. They fear stories that are different because then they do have to see us as fully human, and then they can no longer keep, inflicting violences on us, right? On our peoples, on our communities, if they have to recognize and face the fact that, yes, we are fully human, deserving of full lives and experiences, and our stories deserve to be told. So we're not the villains, but I won't say who is.
I would like to add to that exactly what you're saying, Jasmine. It's not just about banning books, like what you're doing by saying these stories shouldn't exist, is implicitly saying these people shouldn't exist, and that has never been a heroic stance, ever.
I want to honor what a complicated and nuanced question that is, because I do think that there's a lot of people who are in the book banning movement who do see themselves sort of as the hero of their story. The book banning that we have seen in the last 5 years is of a different stripe, right? This is well-funded and with a very specific intent in mind, which I would say it's a extra benefit that it is erasing people's stories that people do not want to have equal say in our culture. And at the same time, it's making people distrust something like public libraries and public schools, which it used to be all America, red America, blue America, appreciated public schools. But by trying to pull these stories and particularly targeting queer authors or authors of color and trying to erase those stories, it's like trying to accomplish two things at once, which is erase the progress that we've had in the diverse books movement, which is pretty new. And so there's a big backlash about that, and make people so angry at public schools that everybody will accept privatizing of public schools, which will make some people very, very rich and will do devastating things for most Americans.
Could a couple of you tell us about the most powerful reaction you've received from a young reader or about one of your banned or challenged books?
Let me tell you a story about what happened when I was previewing my book, Star-Crossed, which is about an 8th grade production of Romeo and Juliet, in which the girl who's playing Romeo realizes she has a crush on the girl playing Juliet. And she's always had crushes on boys before, now she has a crush on a girl. What does that mean? I was talking to 5 different 6th grade classes, and I was doing presentations one after the other. And after my first 2 presentations in which I was talking about this book, the teachers came over to me and said, "We believe in it. We are afraid of parental pushback. And so could you please not talk about that book for the remaining 3 sessions?" I said, "Well, there's nothing in my book that's inappropriate. It's about a crush." And they said, "Still, we're worried about our jobs, basically." So I tried my best to not talk about the book, but of course I ended up talking about the book. And after my presentations, the teachers apologized to the kids and said, "We're sorry that that author talked about that subject." What happened was the kids went home and told their parents that they had an author visit. The author was shut down mid-visit for talking about that book. And then the teachers apologized to the kids for the author talking about that subject. The kids were so angry about the teachers that they went home and they told their parents. And the parents got together, put together a petition, which they presented to the principal. And then the school librarian got together with the parents. They bought a number of copies of the book Star-Crossed. A local bookstore donated copies of the book. So what happened was the teachers gave into their perception of backlash. And what happened was the opposite. The teachers ended up being very embarrassed because the kids the kids saw through what the teachers were doing and stood up, and the parents supported them. So I think there was a real lesson there that, if we think that we're placating or appeasing certain factions, we shouldn't make assumptions about them.
Barbara, I love that you brought that up because it shows what we know, that 72% of Americans believe in the right to read freely. Right. And about that same percentage of bans are coming from this incredibly small group of people, mostly special interest groups and elected politicians. And it has a chilling effect because those teachers have this disproportionate idea because this little minority has managed to make such a lot of noise. And the rest of us, until recently, have not sort of come together in a collective way to be like, no, this is not how we operate. We trust teachers, we trust librarians. And that, they get doxxed and they can lose their job. There's terrible things going on. And here was a situation where the kids, bless you, the kids, went to the parents, and you see the community reacting in a way that holds true with what we like to think of as American values.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that story. To my knowledge, I have not had a book officially put on any banned lists, but I am a Texas author. I live in Texas, and even just the last 2 books, Aniana del Mar jumps in, which is about an Afro-Latina young girl who's a swimmer, and she gets diagnosed with juvenile arthritis, so it deals with lots of intersections of race, disability. She has a queer best friend, and then my reading story of my anger would struggle to even get read. I'm like, I'll do a free school visit. Come, I want to talk to the kids about these stories, and everything has to go through multiple rounds of readers and school board people and has to get approved. And so there's just been, it's like soft censorship, basically. I can't even, and I've reached out to charter schools who I think have a little less sometimes to, bureaucracy in some ways. And it's just been silence and crickets and just I'm like, I just want people, because the times that I've been in schools, one of my most treasured memories is being in a school, and it was with my picture book, Josefina's Habichuelas, and this young girl who probably didn't own any books at home, right, got to take a free copy of my book home, and she's like, she looked at it and she's like, she looks like me, and it still gives me chills, and she hugged the book to her chest, and she's like, I get to take the book home? And I'm like, yes, it's yours, and she was just like so thrilled to have this book with this little girl that looked like her with little afro puffs and everything. And it's like she'd never, owned a book that she got to take home, and like it still gives me chills. And like that's the power that these stories have, right? That representation has with young readers, with young people. And the fact that I'm struggling to just even, I'm like, it's free. Like, I just want to come and do a story time. And they're like, you have to be vetted by all the powers that be.
Those librarians and everybody who are so scared, they're not even going to order them.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
They're not going to order them, let alone invite Jasminne for a school visit, not because they don't like it and not because they don't know that like the amazing thing of showing a reader themselves in a book, but because they're terrified. And this is how it works. Like, and we're entering Banned Book Week, and PEN America just released its sort of latest, and it's like it's become normalized. People have internalized all the fear, and they're not even buying books. So like my middle grade books, which I know are just quietly being not bought because of queer content, like it's not even a thing to ban them. It's just like don't buy them in the first place.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like my strongest reactions to my books have all been in the realm of non-binary and disabled kids coming up to me and telling me how much it meant to them to see themselves in any of my stories. But the thing, I was thinking about what you were saying, Gayle, about like this is where the ends get banned a lot, often because of the fact that there are two queer girls in it and not because of the fact that there's a school shooting in it. Strangely enough, the fact that two girls are in love is seen as worse. But I can definitely understand that perspective of not wanting to sort of invite in scary, bad things that are happening. But with that book in particular, I've had so many school visits and library visits and discussions with like smaller teen groups and everything, where they told me how much it meant to them to have a book like that, to be able to discuss those scary and bad things in a sort of safe space. In a space where they don't have to talk about a school shooting that actually happened in their community. Although I've been to visits where that was the case too, and they sort of used the book to have those, to be able to talk, find words about it, to be able to deal with their grief and their upset and all of that. But also just in general, it was a way for them to have hard discussions in classrooms, in libraries about the things that scared them, the things that they worried about, and being able to do so through a book felt so much safer to them, because it's easier to talk about these things that fictional characters are experiencing at times than it is to talk about your own like deepest fears and anxieties. So I think in those terms too, just having books about like the world at large and all its colors and stories and experiences is just so important, because it helps us get closer to those stories.
Sometimes I think that's the opposite of what the banners want. I mean,
Oh, God, yes.
Jodi Picoult's 19 Minutes is one of the most banned books in America. It is also about school shooting. There's some study that came out recently that like 1 in 10 people have a connection to like an active shooter situation. So it's something that affects lots of people, but that book is banned because it has the word erection in it.
Yes, clearly that is the biggest issue there. Goodness, yeah.
Sometimes it feels like fiction can tell the truth better than nonfiction, especially when it's about hard stuff like racism and mental health. Do you think stories can help people understand things in a way that facts can't?
One of my favorite sayings.
Maybe just to go ahead.
Good. I was gonna say I love these questions because my favorite saying that I always quote is "Fiction is the lie that tells the truth."
Yes, yes. I love these questions. Are fantastic.
So amazing.
No, but just to sort of riff off what I was just saying, I think I think fiction is a fantastic way to have conversations about hard topics, because it's so much easier to, if you're like reading a book and a character is dealing with depression, or a character is dealing with like suicidal thoughts or abuse or assault or any of that, if that's something you're also dealing with and you don't have the words to talk about it, there is nothing more powerful than to be able to look at like experiences that that character shares, and also be able to point at, hey, this is something that I'm dealing with, or maybe, like, can we talk about this character? Can we talk about this book, as a sort of opening into having those hard discussions? So yeah, in my experience, that like books are such a wonderful doorway into talking about everything.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. And of my two books that have been banned, Star-Crossed and Maybe He Just Likes You, I think Maybe He Just Likes You is a book that has been discussed more often, not just among kids, but with teachers and parents. And also, I know that there are faculty book clubs that have used that book to talk about, you know, what they're not picking up on with their own students. And, you know, I often think that there are grown-ups who want to take themselves out of the conversation, because when you have a book about a subject like sexual harassment that I use in Maybe He Just Likes You, what an opportunity to sit down with kids and be part of the conversation, because, you know, kids reach a certain point where they don't want to have conversations with adults. And if you have a middle grade book like this that's dealing with this topic in an age appropriate way, and you as an adult are removing yourself from the conversation, you know, you're missing a chance to participate in your kid's brain. So these books are so good for, you know, communicating with kids, communing with kids, influencing kids, reaching out to kids, listening to kids. You know, it's not just that kids will read these books and see themselves. It's a chance for them to see you as an adult and get your perspective.
Yeah, and I think for me, this idea, right, like you can present facts about a group of people till you're blue in the face, but those facts are numbers, and it's sort of sterile, and it lives in the sort of scientific realm, whereas you present sort of the same ideas and the same the human experience of what those facts represent, and that's how you build empathy. And we know now that empathy is a bad word that we don't want, and God forbid we have empathy towards each other, and books help you build that empathy, right? So it takes those facts. I know I do a ton of research before I put pen to paper, even with my fiction, especially because I know of the topics that I'm dealing with, and I take that information and I think about, how do these politics, how do these numbers, how do these statistics influence this character in their day-to-day life? How do I bring the human back to a group of people that have been vilified, that have had violence towards them in all kinds of ways, that are numbers, right? That you see them only as numbers and facts and figures and all of the rotten things that they've done. And how do I show these individuals in their full humanity, with their highs, with their lows, with their flaws, with their family relationships, their community, their likes, their dislikes. And that's what fiction can do, which then can lead you to those conversations. With Añana del Mar, I had parents who had young people who were diagnosed with juvenile arthritis, and then they read my book and realized, like, wow, is this what my child is going through emotionally? And then they sit with their child and they read the book together and they have those conversations. It opens them up to have those conversations. I've had numerous mothers email me and say, thank you for writing Añana. I had no idea what my child was emotionally going through. This helps start that conversation. Or parents who were diagnosed with juvenile arthritis who then use the book to talk to their kids about what it was like for them growing up with this chronic illness, etc. And so it does. It takes it from sort of the scientific, abstract, you know, graph, right, to the humanity of it, the emotion, the feeling side of things.
I love that. And I think when we think of empathy and how empathy has been rebranded as some kind of weakness, I feel like is a testament to the sorry point that we're in. Mm-hmm. But I think even when people think about empathy, it's always like outward to another person, right? Like you read Jasminne's book and you have empathy for a character who has juvenile arthritis. But it also allows readers to have empathy for themselves, to see a struggle that they're struggling with that maybe looks different, you know, in the facts or in the person having it, but it feels emotionally like something they are going through, which creates a connectivity of like, oh wow, that person and I actually are much more in common than I would have thought in the first place, which is important. And also to let you know that you are not alone, because one of the issues when you are in a serious bit of like depression or anxiety, and I say this from experience, is you think you are the only person in the world that feels like this, and you feel like there is something profoundly wrong with you for feeling this way. So to see that you are not alone just through the power of reading, that alone can be such an important first step in healing and allowing readers to have empathy for themselves as well as for other people.
I think This is going to be so geeky, but one of the things that one of the quotes that I always think about when it comes to both reading and writing is in his acceptance speech to the Nobel Prize for Literature. Kazuo Ishiguro said, "Reading is effectively is a matter of like telling a story, reading a story. It's looking at the world and saying, this is how I feel. Do you feel it too?" And I think that that's such a beautiful way of looking at how stories connect us and how we can find both that empathy towards others and that empathy towards ourselves.
And like, as an author, is that not the most powerful thing when you put that out into the world and someone says, I feel that too? Like,
absolutely.
It's incredible to hear that from readers, and to now know that like books are not going to make it to readers to have that reaction. It's just like another step downward, spiral downward. So, but that's beautiful.
If you could give one message to a kid who is told they can't read your book, what would it be?
Find out why. And push back. Because sometimes these folks don't even have a real reason, or they can't articulate the reason. So if you can explain to me, right, I would say, like, ask why, what is wrong with it and why not? And will there come a time when they're older that they are able to read it? I mean, my initial instinct is to say, read it anyway. That would be the message. But, find out why.
Yeah, I like that. I think my initial instinct is also to say, just read it anyway. But then I immediately think, like, but what if they're in I would say, try to find a safe space, safe situation, safe adult who will guide you through reading it. Because there are situations where a kid may not be able to read a book and is not able to safely do so at home either. So in that situation, like maybe a library, maybe a teacher, maybe a trusted adult in any shape or form. And if you want to find a way to read that book anyway, like ideally, yes. But gosh, it is so complicated because it's the people with the most power being the loudest about it. And I don't want to put kids in a position where they have to stand up to that power in a way that makes them feel unsafe. And at the same time, sometimes I wonder if that's, I'm not sure if there's a way to always safely go about it. So that's a very hard balance, and not something I would, find any sort of general advice in. But find someone who is safe and find someone who is an ally to you and read it anyway.
I guess for me, it would depend on which adult is saying that to you.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
If it's your parent and you feel like you can have a safe conversation about this, can you have a conversation to talk about why? Can you have a suggestion of reading it together? That's a lot to put on your shoulders, maybe a book club with friends. But like, if you feel like your parents are even open to that, like you actually have more power than anybody else to open your parents' mind. But I don't want to put that on you if you don't have it. If it's coming from school or the school board, etc., then I think, can you mobilize? The answer is always trying to get other people to do it with you.
Yes.
Number one, doing anything alone is much harder than doing it with a group. So if it's somebody in your school doing it, like look what happened, Barbara was talking about, those kids must have talked to each other after school. They must have said that was wrong. They must have made some kind of informal plan to go home and talk to their parents. And then something was able to be organized in response to a result that was so much better.
Yeah, community is always a great answer.
What do you want to say to the school librarians in places where books are being banned?
Well, I think, one thing that we've been touching on is the importance of community. And so I think that, if a school librarian reaches out to the school community, they will find support. I would also like to, often they will find support. I would also like to mention the book The Librarian by Amanda Jones, who's a very brave, wonderful librarian in Louisiana who has faced a lot of difficulty as a school librarian. And she has really been a champion of the right to read, and her book shows all the steps that she's been going through and the ways that she's been mobilizing other school librarians and other public librarians to walk with her in her fight. School librarians should not feel like they are alone. There is a community of parents and students and teachers that they can work with, but also, they can get a lot of support from other school librarians across the country. There's also going to be actually, I think it's out now. There's a documentary about I would recommend seeing that.
Wednesday, we have the producer and the director of the documentary, The Librarians, coming on Zoom half an hour from now.
Great.
Hey, awesome.
I feel like for all the Amanda Jones there are in the world, I feel exhausted on behalf of librarians that they even have to take on this role.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like they are heroic, and I Representative Sarah McBride was on some podcasts, and she gave a quote that I've been using constantly. And it's like, if her father says, if everybody has a little bit of courage, nobody has to be a hero. It's wonderful that Amanda Jones is that. Librarians should not have to risk being doxxed and fired and harassed in order just to do their jobs. So I just want to I would tell librarians, like, I see what you are dealing with. And like, I know it's like great for us to be like, rah, rah, yay, librarians. And at the end of the day, they're having to make decisions about whether or not to carry a book that they know will benefit their students or lose their jobs. And that's such an impossible bind to be put into. But I think of Sarah McBride's dad, and it's like, how can we all have a little bit of courage so that nobody needs to be a hero?
Yeah, I would say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My husband is a high school teacher here in Texas. And so I hear the stories. It comes home every day. As a teacher, he also has to be very mindful and careful, teacher in Texas, in like probably the largest school district in the state. And so it's thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do. Please don't lose hope. Please also, reach out to us writers and send us a note. Even if you can't stock the book, just be like, I read it. It's great. Thank you for what you're doing. And I'll slip it in a note to my student to go find the book outside of school. Just even recommending, or I don't know. There's so many rules and so many laws that it's all sort of gray, or they're not sure what they can say or do or not say. But I know some teachers out here have found loopholes with the way things are written. So you can't share the whole book, but you can share excerpts. Is what I'm told. So,
Jasminne, is your husband? Are you in one of those districts that the school board's completely flipped?
It's been taken over by the state.
It's been taken over by what?
By the state.
Some of the school districts in Texas that went had the super crazy book banners. Yeah. In the most recent election, because parents and people organized, we saw a complete shift in the non-book banning direction. So a little bit of hope. Yeah, they're
not necessarily banned, but because of the state takeover, like 70% of our libraries and schools are gone and are now like suspension rooms for bad students, because that's the proper use of resources. So again, that's the idea of soft censorship. So thank you for, librarians, teachers. I know it's rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are all in this together. So like, if there's anything that we can do on like a specific library basis, please reach out. And I think we're all in this together. It definitely also extends to parents and to community members who care about book banning and who want to put a stop to it. Like what you're doing right now, which is absolutely amazing. You are so much stronger like than those few ridiculously loud voices. So come together, organize, be politically active, let your voices be heard to support your local librarians and school librarians too.
If you could protect one book, not your own, from ever being banned, what would it be?
The Constitution.
That's the answer.
How do I get that answer?
I would also, as a very, like, this is a very Dutch answer, but I would also say Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. Because it hurts my soul every time I see that book is banned. And I think especially in these days, it is such an important work of non-fiction, which I feel like I should also add. It is so relevant, and it's too relevant, and that is terrifying. But that book should just be read by everyone at some point in their lives. But also the answer is all books, honestly.
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And I'll just It's just, everyone should read it. Toni Morrison, you can't, and everyone should read all of Toni Morrison. None of her books should be banned, but I'm going to choose one. It would be The Bluest Eye. And I'd say 1984, which we thought was fiction, but here we are.
Yikes.
Is that banned? 1984?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
All over the place.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder
The Giver.
why.
Yep.
It's starting with children's books, but it's just an attack. I mean, book banning is never just about book banning.
No.
It starts with book banning. And we're seeing where it's going across the board in terms of how we are seeing speech restricted in our country in a way that is just so the stuff of 1984 that we can't reconcile the fact that it is happening and increasing. And then it makes people panic because it's like, I just want to go hide. And really, we just all need to come together collectively and figure out a way out.
We want to thank you for writing books kids need. I can't tell you each how much it means that you showed up today, girls. Thank you.
I mean, who's blown away by these two? Like, gives me a little bit of hope knowing that people like you are out there leading the charge. It's amazing, this program you've put together. And what incredible questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. This is just fantastic.